Poorest girl in the neighborhood rescues humiliated wheelchair-bound millionaire, and what he does next. The morning in the Bronx, in the south of New York City, began like any other for Maya Mitchell. The 8-year-old girl woke up in the shack of tarp and plywood, where she lived with her 68-year-old grandmother Martha Mitchell, who had raised her granddaughter alone since the child's parents left in search of work and never returned. What Maya didn't imagine was that this day would completely change her life when she witnessed a scene that would leave her outraged on Grand Concourse. An elegant man in a wheelchair was being surrounded by a group of young people who were laughing and pointing at him, making nasty comments about his physical condition. "Look at the useless rich guy," shouted one of the boys, pushing the wheelchair toward a puddle of dirty water. "Can't even defend himself." Julian Sterling Jr., 45, tried to maintain his dignity as his important documents were scattered on the wet ground. The businessman had lost the use of his legs in a car accident 2 years before, and since then had faced not only physical difficulties, but also the prejudice of a society that saw him as incapable. "Please stop this," murmured Julian, trying to gather the papers flying in the wind. The young people laughed even louder, and one of them purposely kicked a document folder that opened, scattering important contracts across the street. Dozens of pedestrians passed by on the sidewalk. Some stopped to watch, but no one approached to help. The humiliating scene was happening in broad daylight, and the businessman felt completely helpless. It was at that moment that Maya, who was returning from the scrapyard where she sold cans collected from the dump, saw the situation. The girl carried a dirty cloth bag on her back and wore a brown t-shirt stained with dirt, her bare feet stepping on the hot asphalt. Her blonde hair was disheveled and her face was dirty, but her eyes shone with determination. "Hey, stop doing that to him," shouted Maya, dropping her bag and running toward the group. The young people turned, surprised to see the small girl approaching. One of them, looking about 16, laughed. "Look who showed up to defend the cripple, the dump princess," he said provocatively. "He's not a cripple and you have no right to treat anyone like that," replied Maya, positioning herself between the aggressors and Julian. The leader of the group, a tall, thin young man, bent down to be at the girl's eye level. "Listen here, Stinky. You're nothing but human trash. Go back to your hole and let the adults handle things." Maya felt tears in her eyes, but she didn't back down. Instead, she began gathering the scattered documents, not caring about the dirty water soaking her already worn-out clothes. Julian watched the scene in astonishment, impressed by the courage of this child who didn't know him but was willing to defend him. "I won't let you hurt him," said Maya, her voice trembling but determined. "My grandma always says we have to help those in need." The young people realized the commotion was attracting more attention and, annoyed, decided to leave before someone alerted the authorities. "This isn't over, trash princess," threatened the leader before walking away with the group. Maya continued gathering the wet papers, trying to organize them as best she could. Julian, still in shock from what he had witnessed, watched the girl's every move. When she approached to hand him the documents, he could see up close the dirty but determined face of the child. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked. "You didn't have to do that. They could have hurt you too." Maya wiped her tears with the back of her dirty hand, leaving more smudges on her face. "Grandma Mitchell always says that when we see someone being mistreated, we have to help. It doesn't matter if they're rich or poor, big or small." Julian was speechless. During all those years running his company, he had never encountered such genuine kindness. The girl didn't know who he was, didn't expect any reward. She simply acted out of compassion. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya Mitchell, and you?" Julian Sterling." The girl nodded and picked up her bag from the ground. When she was about to leave, Julian tried to stop her. "Wait. I'd like to thank you properly. Maybe I could—" But Maya had already disappeared among the people on the sidewalk, running nimbly toward the community where she lived. Julian stood there for a few minutes, still processing what had happened. When he finally looked at the documents the girl had gathered, he realized one of them was missing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. It was the most important contract of all, an international partnership agreement worth $50 million that was supposed to be signed later that week. The document contained confidential information that couldn't fall into the wrong hands. Julian felt a chill in his stomach, imagining the consequences if that paper ended up with his competitors. Meanwhile, Maya was running through the winding streets of the community, eager to get home and tell her grandmother what had happened. The shack where they lived was at the back of a family's property who had allowed them to build there in exchange for small domestic services. Martha Mitchell was sitting at the entrance of the shack, sorting recyclable materials she had collected during the morning. At 68 years old, the woman maintained impressive energy despite the difficulties she faced raising her granddaughter alone. Her grey hair was tied in a messy bun, and her calloused hands showed a lifetime of hard work. "Grandma!" shouted Maya, arriving breathless. "Something really strange happened today." Martha looked up from the cans she was organizing and smiled at the sight of her granddaughter. Even in the toughest conditions, Maya always came home with stories to tell. "What is it now, my flower? Did you find another treasure at the scrapyard?" "No, Grandma, it was different. I saw some big boys mistreating a man in a wheelchair and I couldn't just stand there." Martha stopped what she was doing and looked intently at her granddaughter. She knew that expression on Maya's face well, the same one that appeared whenever the girl witnessed some injustice. "You got into trouble, didn't you?" "I just helped him, Grandma. The boys were throwing his papers in the dirty water and making fun of him. It wasn't right." Martha sighed. On one hand, she worried about her granddaughter's safety, but on the other, she was proud of the kind heart the girl had inherited. "And what happened after?" "I helped him gather the papers and the boys left. He seemed very sad, Grandma, and very lonely too." "What was he like?" "Elegant. He wore nice clothes and spoke politely. But he was very scared." Martha nodded thoughtfully. During her many years of life, she had learned that appearances can be deceiving and that both rich and poor people could go through hardships. "You did right, my granddaughter. We always have to help when we can." Maya smiled and went to the little corner where she kept her few belongings. That's when she noticed something strange among her things, a folded paper that hadn't been there that morning. "Grandma, look at this," she said, picking up the document. Martha approached and examined the paper. Although she couldn't read very well, she recognized it was something important by the official markings and the quality of the paper. "This must have fallen from the man's documents when you were helping him," said the grandmother. "We have to return it, Maya. This paper could be very important to him." The girl agreed immediately. The idea of keeping something that wasn't hers would never cross her mind. "But how am I going to find him again, Grandma? New York City is so big." Martha thought for a moment. During her 68 years of life, most of them lived in the same community. She had learned that when people want to meet, fate always finds a way. "We'll figure it out, my flower. Important people leave traces. We'll look for him early tomorrow." That night, Julian arrived at his apartment on the Upper East Side completely exhausted. The afternoon episode had left deep marks on his self-esteem, but at the same time he couldn't stop thinking about the courage of that unknown girl. His apartment was luxurious and modern, with a panoramic view of the city, but it felt emptier than ever. Since the accident that left him paraplegic, Julian had gradually isolated himself from friends and family, burying himself more and more in work as a way to escape reality. When he finally managed to organize the documents Maya had gathered, he discovered the missing international contract. His heart raced as he realized the scale of the problem. Without that document, the entire negotiation he had been building for months could collapse. Julian immediately called his assistant, Brenda Harrison, an efficient 55-year-old woman who had worked with him for over a decade. "Brenda, I need you to organize a search of the entire Grand Concourse area. I lost a very important document this afternoon." "Mr. Sterling, it's almost 10 at night. Wouldn't it be better to wait until tomorrow?" "This document is worth $50 million, Brenda. I can't wait." The assistant understood the urgency and promised to organize a team to scour the area the next morning. But Julian knew the chances of finding the paper amid the city's bustle were minimal. All night, he lay awake, thinking about what had happened. The image of the brave girl standing up for him wouldn't leave his mind. In a world where he had grown accustomed to the falseness of self-serving relationships, that gesture of genuine kindness had touched him deeply. The next morning, Martha woke up early as she always did. Her routine included preparing a weak coffee to share with her granddaughter and organizing the day's work, collecting recyclable materials. But that morning, she had a different mission. "Maya, wake up, my flower. We're going to return this paper to its owner." The girl opened her eyes immediately. She had slept poorly, worried about the document in her possession. Martha had explained that important papers could be very valuable to people, and she didn't want the polite man to have problems because of her. "How are we going to find him, Grandma?" "First, we'll go to the avenue where you found him. Maybe he'll go back there looking for the paper." The two dressed in the best clothes they had, which wasn't much different from the day before, and set off toward the Grand Concourse. The journey took about 40 minutes on foot, passing through various streets in the area. When they arrived at the location of the incident, they found two people dressed in corporate uniforms searching the ground and nearby flower beds. Maya immediately recognized they might be looking for the lost document. "Grandma, I think those people are looking for the paper," she whispered. Mrs. Mitchell observed the employees and agreed that seemed to be the situation. "Let's talk to them," said the grandmother, heading toward the employees. "Excuse me," said Mrs. Mitchell, approaching a middle-aged woman who appeared to be coordinating the search. "Are you looking for some lost document?" Brenda Harrison looked up and examined the elderly woman and the girl approaching. The social difference between them was evident, and she automatically assumed a defensive posture. "Yes, we are, but it's confidential business matter. It's just that my granddaughter found an important paper yesterday here in this place," continued Mrs. Mitchell, ignoring the assistant's cold tone. Brenda's eyes lit up immediately. "What kind of paper?" Maya Mitchell approached timidly and showed the folded document. "It's this one. I was helping a man in a wheelchair and it must have gotten mixed with the other papers." Brenda could hardly believe what she was seeing. It was exactly the contract they were looking for. Without a second thought, she reached out to take the document. "That is exactly the paper we're looking for. Thank you so much." But Maya took a step back, protecting the document. "I'll only give it to the owner. Where's the man in the wheelchair?" Brenda was irritated by the girl's distrust. "I work for him. You can hand me the document and I'll take it to Mr. Julian." "No," said Maya firmly. "I want to see him personally." Mrs. Mitchell supported her granddaughter's decision. Although she didn't fully understand the document's importance, she knew her daughter was right to want to return it directly to the owner. "The girl wants to do the right thing," said the grandmother. "Where can we find this Mr. Julian?" Brenda found herself in a difficult situation. On one hand, she urgently needed to recover the document. On the other, she knew Julian would hardly receive two people from the outskirts in his office. "Mr. Julian is a very busy businessman. He doesn't have time for unscheduled visits." "Then schedule one," said Maya, surprising everyone with her determination. "I'm not leaving until I speak with him." The assistant realized she wouldn't be able to convince the girl easily. Reluctantly, she took her cell phone and called Julian. "Mr. Julian, we found the document. It's with a girl who insists on handing it to you personally." On the other end of the line, Julian was intrigued. Could it possibly be the same girl who had helped him the day before? "What does she look like?" "A child from the outskirts, about 8 years old, blonde hair, accompanied by an elderly lady." Julian's heart raced. It was her. The brave girl who had stood up for him had his most important document. "Bring them to the office immediately," he ordered. "Sir, with all due respect, perhaps it's not appropriate. Brenda, this girl helped me yesterday when I was in trouble. Bring them here now." The assistant sighed and hung up the phone. She looked at Mrs. Mitchell and Maya, still reluctant. "Mr. Julian will see you, but we need to go now, and I ask that you don't touch anything in the office." Maya smiled for the first time since she had woken up. Finally, she could return the paper and be sure she had done the right thing. The trip to Julian's office was a completely new experience for Maya and Mrs. Mitchell. They had never entered a commercial building in central New York City. The building housing Sterling and Partners was 20 stories tall and entirely clad in mirrored glass. In the lobby, the doorman looked suspiciously at the two visitors, but Brenda quickly explained they had a scheduled meeting. The elevator rose smoothly to the 18th floor, and Maya was hypnotized watching the city shrink through the glass wall. "I never thought New York City was so big," she murmured to her grandmother. Martha was also impressed, but tried to maintain her composure. She had worked as a cleaner in commercial buildings for a few years when she was younger, before dedicating herself full-time to collecting recyclable materials. When the elevator doors opened, they were faced with a sophisticated office, with modern furniture and a spectacular view of the city. Several people were moving around the place, all wearing elegant clothes and talking on cell phones. Brenda led them down a wide hallway to a room with double wooden doors. She knocked softly before entering. "Mr. Julian, your visitors have arrived." Julian was positioned behind a huge executive desk, but when he saw Maya enter, a genuine smile formed on his face. It was really her, the brave girl who had defended a stranger on the street. "Maya," he said with evident joy in his voice. The girl smiled timidly and approached the desk, followed by Martha. "Hi, Mr. Julian. I brought your paper." "You found the lost document?" "It was mixed in with my things. Sorry, I didn't see it at the time." Maya handed the paper to Julian, who received it with trembling hands. It was exactly the international contract he needed. "Maya, you have no idea how important this paper is to me. How can I thank you?" "You don't have to thank me. Grandma always says we have to return things that aren't ours." Julian looked at Martha, who had remained silent, observing the interaction between her granddaughter and the businessman. "You must be Maya's grandmother. Nice to meet you. I'm Julian Sterling." "Martha Mitchell. The pleasure is ours, Mr. Julian. Please, have a seat," he said, indicating two armchairs in front of his desk. Brenda remained in the room, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. She couldn't understand why her boss was dedicating so much time to those people. "Maya, you've saved me twice," Julian continued. "Yesterday you defended me from those boys, and today you brought back the most important document for my company." "You were very sad yesterday," said Maya. "Those boys were very mean to you." "Sometimes people don't know how to deal with those who are different," replied Julian, discreetly touching the arm of his wheelchair. Martha watched the businessman closely. There was something in his eyes that she recognized, a deep sadness that went beyond the physical difficulty. "Mr. Julian, may I ask a question?" said the grandmother. "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Do you have family?" The question caught Julian off guard. He was silent for a few seconds before answering. "Not anymore. After my accident, people drifted away. I discovered many friendships were based on self-interest." "That's very sad," said Maya, with the honesty only children possess. "It is, little one. But yesterday you showed me that there are still good people in this world." Julian opened a desk drawer and took out an envelope. "I would like to offer a reward for returning the document. This contract is worth a lot of money to my company." Maya looked at her grandmother, who discreetly shook her head no. "We don't want money, Mr. Julian. We just wanted to do the right thing." "But I insist. You've helped me so much." "You really don't have to," said Martha. "We didn't help expecting a reward." Julian was even more impressed by the dignity of those two people. In his business world, all relationships were based on exchanging favors and mutual interests. "Then at least allow me to repay you in some way. Perhaps lunch?" Maya looked at her grandmother expectantly. They rarely had the opportunity to eat at a restaurant. "We don't want to be a bother," said Martha. "It wouldn't be a bother at all. It would be a pleasure." Brenda, who had silently followed the entire conversation, finally spoke up. "Mr. Sterling, you have a meeting with the Japanese investors in 1 hour." Julian had completely forgotten about the meeting. The contract that Maya had returned was precisely for this negotiation. "All right, Mrs. Mitchell, Maya, how about we meet tomorrow for lunch? I can send my driver to pick you up." Martha hesitated. Although she had taken a liking to Julian, she wasn't used to that kind of invitation. "Are you sure it won't be a bother?" "Absolutely certain. In fact, it would be a gift to me." Maya clapped her hands with joy, and her spontaneous reaction made Julian smile genuinely for the first time in a long while. "Then it's settled," said Martha. "Where should we meet you?" "I'll have Brenda send you the address of a restaurant. And please, Don't worry about clothes or anything like that. You are perfect exactly as you are." The two said goodbye to Julian and left, accompanied by the assistant. In the elevator, Brenda couldn't hide her disapproval. "I hope you don't think you can take advantage of Mr. Sterling's kindness," she said coldly. Martha looked directly into the assistant's eyes. "Young lady, I've lived 68 years without asking anyone for favors. I'm not about to start now." Brenda was embarrassed by the elderly woman's response and remained silent for the rest of the ride. Meanwhile, Julian tried to focus on the meeting with the Japanese investors, but his mind kept returning to the encounter with Maya and Martha. He hadn't felt so good in the company of others in a long time. The meeting was a success. The Japanese were impressed with the details of the contract that Maya had returned, and they closed a partnership that would guarantee millions in revenue for the company. But throughout the presentation, Julian thought about how an 8-year-old girl had been more honest than most business people he knew. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. That night, Maya told all the neighbors about her visit to the giant building and about the polite man in the wheelchair. The children in the community were fascinated by the story, and some adults commented that they recognized the name Sterling from the newspapers. "Maya, did you know that man is very famous?" asked Mrs. Gable, a 60-year-old neighbor who always followed the news. "Famous how? He has a very large company. He's always on the TV news." Martha became thoughtful with this information. If Julian was truly an important person, perhaps it wasn't appropriate to continue the relationship. She didn't want people to think they were trying to take advantage of the situation. But when she saw the joy on Maya's face as she talked about her new friend, she decided not to interfere. The girl had been through many hardships in life and deserved to have some moments of happiness. The next day, a black luxury car stopped in front of the community. The driver, a polite, middle-aged man, asked for Martha Mitchell. Several people gathered to see the vehicle, which was definitely not common in that area. Martha and Maya timidly approached the car. The driver got out and opened the rear door for them. "Mrs. Mitchell and little Maya, I'm William, Mr. Sterling's driver. He is waiting for you at the restaurant." The ride to the restaurant was quiet. Both the grandmother and granddaughter were nervous about the novelty of riding in such an elegant car. Maya was impressed with the leather seats and the air conditioning, things she had never experienced before. The restaurant chosen by Julian was elegant, but not overly formal. He had carefully thought of a place where Martha and Maya would feel comfortable. When they arrived, he was already waiting at a reserved table, still in his wheelchair. "I'm so glad you came," he said with a genuine smile. Maya ran to greet him while Martha approached more cautiously. "Mr. Julian, thank you so much for the invitation. You didn't need to go to such luxury. You deserve the best, Mrs. Mitchell. Please have a seat." During lunch, Julian made a point of learning more about the lives of the two. He discovered that Martha had raised Maya alone since she was 2 years old, when the girl's parents left in search of work in another state and were never heard from again. "It must have been very difficult to raise a child alone," commented Julian. "It is difficult, but Maya is a blessing in my life. She gives me strength to carry on every day." Maya, who was trying many different dishes for the first time, stopped eating to ask a question. "Mr. Julian, why are you sad?" The girl's direct question caught the businessman off guard. He was silent for a moment, thinking how to answer. "Sometimes bad things happen in our lives, Maya, and when that happens, we feel sad for a while." "But you can't be sad forever, right? Grandma always says that after the rain, the sun always comes out." "Your grandmother is very wise," said Julian, looking at Martha with admiration. "Mr. Julian, may I ask what happened?" said Martha gently. Julian hesitated for a moment. He hadn't talked about the accident with anyone in a long time. 2 years ago, I was in a car accident. I lost the use of my legs and, well, I also lost many things I thought were important." "Like what?" asked Maya, with the innocent curiosity of children. "Friends, family, even my fiancé. I found out people only liked me when I was whole." Martha felt her heart tighten at the businessman's story. She recognized in those words the pain of someone who had been abandoned in the most difficult moments. "Mr. Julian, may I say something?" said the grandmother. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. You don't need people who only stick around when everything is fine. Good people stay close in joy and in sorrow. That's true, confirmed Maya. Just like me and Grandma. When she gets sick, I take care of her. When I get sick, she takes care of me. Julian was moved by the simplicity and wisdom of those two people. In just a few hours, they had shown more genuine affection than he had received from his own family in 2 years. You two are very special people, he said, his voice choked. We like you too, Maya replied spontaneously. Martha smiled, seeing the connection forming between her granddaughter and the businessman. There was something paternal in the way Julian looked at Maya, and something filial in the way the girl addressed him. After lunch, Julian insisted on taking the two to see some beautiful places in the city. They visited Central Park, where Maya had her first experience pedaling a boat on the lake. The girl's joy was contagious, and Julian found himself laughing more that afternoon than he had in years. During the visit to the park, Martha observed how Julian interacted with her granddaughter. He was patient, attentive, and genuinely interested in the child's questions and comments. It was evident that he was starved for affection and finding in Maya a source of joy he had lost. Mr. Julian, may I ask a personal question? Said Martha when they were sitting on a bench watching Maya feed the ducks. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Do you have children? The businessman was silent for a long moment, watching the girl play by the lake's edge. No. My ex-fiancée and I planned to have children after the wedding, but when the accident happened, she said she couldn't handle a disabled person and left. I'm so sorry. That must have been very painful. It was, mainly because I loved her and thought she loved me too. Martha observed Julian for a few moments before speaking again. You know what kind of disabled she was, right? What do you mean? She was disabled in the heart. A person with a properly functioning heart doesn't abandon someone they love in times of difficulty. Martha's simple words struck Julian deeply. For the first time in 2 years, he was able to see the situation from a different perspective. You're right, Mrs. Mitchell. I've lived a long life, Mr. Julian, and I've learned that difficult times serve to show who people really are. At that moment, Maya came running back to them, her face radiant with happiness. Grandma, Mr. Julian, did you see the baby ducklings? They're so tiny. Yes, we did, my flower, said Martha, hugging her granddaughter. Mr. Julian, can you come visit us at our house? Asked Maya, with natural ease. Julian was surprised by the invitation. In his world, people always invited him to sophisticated places. The idea of visiting a simple home in the outskirts had never crossed his mind. Are you sure your grandmother wouldn't mind? I'm inviting you too, said Martha. Our home is very simple, but it would be a pleasure to have you. Then I would love to see your home. Maya clapped her hands with joy and began planning what she would show Julian when he visited the community. On the way back, in the businessman's car, Maya fell asleep in the back seat. Julian watched the girl sleeping peacefully and felt a tenderness he hadn't experienced in a long time. Mrs. Mitchell, may I say you've done a wonderful job raising Maya, he whispered. Thank you, Mr. Julian. She is a special child indeed. She's always been very kind. Where did she learn to be so brave? Life taught her. When you don't have much, you learn to value what's truly important. And what is truly important? The people we love. Everything else is just detail. Julian grew thoughtful with the answer. Throughout his life, he had focused on building wealth and professional success, but now he realized he had neglected what really mattered. Mrs. Mitchell, may I make a confession? Of course, Mr. Julian. I haven't felt as good as I did today in a very long time. You two have brought joy to my life. We also really enjoy being with you. Maya hasn't stopped talking about you since we got home yesterday. Really? She said you have sad eyes but a good heart. Children always get these things right. Julian smiled upon hearing the description Maya had made of him. It was impressive how an 8-year-old could see beyond appearances. When they arrived at the community, several people gathered to see the luxury car. Julian felt a bit uncomfortable with the attention, but Martha reassured the neighbors by explaining he was a friend. "Mr. Julian, how about seeing our home right now?" asked Maya, who had woken up as soon as the car stopped. "It would be an honor." Julian asked his driver to wait for him and followed Martha and Maya through the narrow alleys of the community. The experience of navigating his wheelchair over the dirt streets was challenging, but he was determined not to let it stop him. When they reached the tarp and wood shack where the two lived, Julian was shocked by the precarious conditions. The space was tiny, with only 2 mattresses on the floor and a few belongings carefully organized. "Welcome to our home," said Martha, with genuine pride. Despite the evident poverty, the environment was clean and organized. There was a small makeshift altar with some candles and an image of the Virgin Mary, and the canvas walls were decorated with drawings that Maya had made with worn-out colored pencils. "Mr. Julian, would you like to see my drawings?" asked Maya excitedly. "I'd love to." The girl proudly showed each of her drawings, explaining the stories behind each one. There were drawings of happy families, of houses with gardens, of children playing in parks. All reflected the simple dreams of a child who knew little of the world but had much love to give. "You draw very well, Maya," said Julian, genuinely impressed with the girl's creativity. "Grandma gave me the colored pencils for my birthday. They were the best presents I've ever received." Julian looked at Martha, who smiled proudly at her granddaughter. It was evident that the grandmother had made a great financial sacrifice to buy those simple colored pencils. "Mr. Julian, would you like a little coffee?" offered Martha. "With pleasure, Mrs. Mitchell." While the grandmother prepared the coffee on a makeshift stove made from cans, Maya continued showing her treasures to Julian. There was a cloth doll made by Martha herself, some books donated by the school, and a collection of colorful little stones the girl had found during her walks. "This is my most precious treasure," said Maya, showing a small, faded photograph. "Who are these people?" "My parents. Grandma says they went on a trip and will come back one day." Julian felt a pang in his heart upon seeing the hope in the girl's eyes. Martha had protected her granddaughter from the painful truth about her parents' abandonment, allowing her to maintain her innocence and hope. "They seem like very nice people," he said gently. "They are. When they come back, I'll show them all my new drawings." Martha served the coffee in mismatched mugs, but did so with all the elegance of an experienced hostess. The coffee was strong and flavorful, prepared with great care. "Mrs. Mitchell, this coffee is delicious," said Julian. "Thank you, it's just a little, but it's made with a lot of love. Love is the most important ingredient in anything." They talked for over an hour, and Julian was impressed by Martha's practical wisdom and Maya's contagious joy. Despite all the difficulties they faced, they maintained a positive attitude and a generosity of spirit that he rarely encountered in his social circle. When it was finally time to leave, Julian felt reluctant to go. He had found in that simple home a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Thank you for having me in your home," he said. "It was one of the most enriching experiences I've ever had." "You are always welcome here," replied Martha. "Mr. Julian, are you going to come back?" asked Maya expectantly. "If you'll have me, I'd love to come back. Of course, you can come whenever you want." On the way back to his apartment, Julian couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. Martha's dignity in the face of poverty, Maya's genuine joy despite the hardships, and the sincere love the two shared had touched him deeply. That night, for the first time in years, Julian went to sleep, feeling there was something worth waking up for the next day. The prospect of seeing Martha and Maya again had brought a renewed purpose to his life. In the following days, Julian began visiting the community regularly. Initially, the neighbors were suspicious of the rich man in the wheelchair, but gradually they came to realize his intentions were genuine. Maya became his guide through the community, introducing him to the other children and showing him all the special little corners of the neighborhood. Julian discovered a completely new world, full of solidarity, creativity, and joy despite the hardships. It was during one of these visits that he met Mr. Joe, a 70-year-old man who had lost a leg in a work accident and got around with makeshift crutches. "So you're the businessman that little Maya won't stop talking about," said Mr. Joe with a warm smile. "Pleasure to meet you. Maya speaks of all of you with such affection. She's a light for this whole community. always helping everyone, always with a smile on her face. Julian watched Mr. Joe move with difficulty along the dirt roads and identified with the mobility challenges the man faced. "It must be hard to get around here on crutches," commented Julian. "Ah, you get used to it. The important thing is not to give up, right? How do you manage to keep your spirits up? I look at these kids here. They have nothing, but they're the happiest people I know. That teaches me that happiness isn't about what you have, but about who you are." Mr. Joe's words echoed in Julian's mind. All his life, he had pursued happiness through material achievements, but now he was beginning to understand that perhaps he had been looking in the wrong place. A week after his first visit to the community, Julian received a phone call that would change everything. It was his minority partner in the company, Richard Thorne, an ambitious man who had always questioned Julian's decisions. "Julian, we need to talk urgently," said Richard in a serious tone. "About what?" "About the future of the company and about your current situation." "What situation?" "Julian, you've been acting very strange lately. The employees are talking about your constant visits to the neighborhood. It's not good for the company's image." Julian was irritated by his partner's prejudiced attitude. "Richard, what I do in my free time is not the company's concern." "It is when you're the CEO. The investors are questioning your leadership ability." "Based on what?" "Based on the fact that you've been spending more time with beggars than with important clients." The word beggars hit Julian like a slap in the face. Richard was referring to Martha and Maya, two of the most dignified people he had ever met. "Richard, this conversation is over." "Wait, Julian, I'm trying to help you. The board is meeting next week to discuss a possible change in leadership." Julian hung up the phone furious, but at the same time worried. The company he had built over 15 years was being threatened because of his new friendship with Martha and Maya. That afternoon he decided not to visit the community, trying to focus on work. But he realized his heart was there, in the simple canvas house where he had found more joy in 1 week than in years of business success. Maya, in turn, grew worried when Julian didn't show up for his usual visit. She had prepared a special drawing to show him, and his absence left her confused. "Grandma, do you think Mr. Julian doesn't like us anymore?" she asked, with tears in her eyes. "Of course he does, my flower. He must be busy with work." "But he always came. Did I do something wrong?" Martha hugged her granddaughter, but she was also worried. She had noticed how important Julian had become to Maya and feared the girl would get hurt if he disappeared from their lives. "Tomorrow we'll go there to see if he's all right," the grandmother decided. The next morning, Martha and Maya took 2 buses to get to the building of Julian's company. In the reception area, they were met with coldness by the same secretary who had assisted them before. "Mr. Julian cannot receive visitors today," said Brenda, without even checking the schedule. "But it's important," insisted Martha. "We wanted to know if he's okay." "He's fine, just busy with important company matters." Maya felt tears in her eyes upon sensing the rejection. Martha, seeing her granddaughter's distress, decided to be more direct. "Miss, could you please let Mr. Julian know that Martha and Maya are here? It will only take a minute." "I already said he cannot be disturbed." It was at that moment that Richard Thorne passed through the lobby and saw the 2 visitors. He immediately recognized them as the people from the favela who were negatively influencing his partner. "Excuse me," he said, approaching. "Are you the people who have been visiting Julian?" "We are friends of Mr. Julian," replied Martha, suspicious of the man's tone. "I see. Look, I'll be direct with you. Julian is going through a delicate time at the company, and it would be better if you stopped visiting him for a while." "Why?" asked Maya, innocently. Richard looked at the girl with disdain. "Because you don't belong in his world. You're causing unnecessary problems." Martha felt her blood boil at the man's arrogance, but kept calm for her granddaughter's sake. "Sir, what exactly are you trying to say?" "I'm saying it would be better for everyone if you forgot this friendship and went back to where you belong." Richard's words deeply hurt both Martha and Maya. The girl began to cry, and her grandmother decided it was time to leave before the situation worsened. "Come on, Maya, let's go." As they left the building, Richard went up to Julian's office with a satisfied smile. He had solved the problem of the unwanted visitors. "Julian, I just handled that awkward situation in the lobby," he said, entering the room. "What situation?" "Those people from the favela were here wanting to bother you again. I explained that you didn't have time for that sort of charity." Julian was furious upon realizing Richard had interfered in his personal life. "Richard, you had no right to do that." "I certainly did. As a partner in this firm, I have the right to protect our image. Martha and Maya are my friends." "Julian, you're delusional. Those people are only interested in your money, can't you see that? Richard, you don't know them. They are decent, kind people. Julian, you need help. That accident affected more than your legs. It affected your judgment." Richard's accusation was the last straw for Julian. He realized his partner was trying to use his physical disability to question his mental sanity. "Richard, our partnership ends here. I'm buying you out of the firm." "You can't push me out like this, Julian. I have rights. And I have enough money to exercise mine." Richard left the office furious, but Julian was more worried about Martha and Maya. He immediately called the reception desk. "Brenda, are the two people who came to visit me today still here?" "No, sir. They left about 20 minutes ago." Julian quickly headed for the elevator and went down to the lobby, hoping to find the two still in the area. But when he reached the street, there was no sign of them. He asked his driver to circle the nearby blocks, but it was as if they had disappeared. Desperate, Julian decided to go directly to the community. When he arrived at Martha and Maya's shack, he found the door closed. A neighbor informed him that the two had left early and had not yet returned. All afternoon, Julian waited in the community, talking with neighbors and trying to understand what had happened. It was Mr. Joe who finally told him the full version of events. "They arrived here crying, son. The girl was inconsolable. Mrs. Mitchell said a man from your office was very rude to them." "Where are they now?" "They left to look for work in another neighborhood. Mrs. Mitchell said she didn't want to cause problems for you." Julian felt his heart break upon realizing that his friendship with Richard had hurt the two people he cared most about at the moment. He decided he would do everything to find them and explain the situation. For 3 days, Julian searched for Martha and Maya all over the area. He visited junkyards, recycling collection sites, public schools, anywhere he imagined they might be, but it was as if they had vanished from the face of the earth. At the company, Richard took advantage of Julian's emotional absence to scheme with other minority shareholders in a maneuver to remove him from the presidency. He spread rumors that Julian was suffering from severe depression and was no longer fit to lead the company. "Look, everyone," said Richard during a meeting with investors, "Julian has spent the last few days searching for 2 people from the slums on the streets of New York City. Is that the behavior of someone mentally stable?" The investors began to question Julian's leadership ability, especially considering the major contracts the company was negotiating. Meanwhile, Martha and Maya had temporarily moved to a distant cousin's house in Queens. The girl was deeply saddened by losing contact with Julian, and Martha blamed herself for allowing her granddaughter to become so attached to someone from a world different from their own. "Grandma, do you think Mr. Julian doesn't like us anymore?" Valentina asked every day. "That's not it, my flower. Sometimes important people like him can't be friends with simple people like us." "But why not?" "Because the world is complicated and everyone has their place." Martha said this to protect her granddaughter, but deep down she was also confused and hurt. She had genuinely liked Julian and thought he liked them too. The coldness with which they were treated at the office made her question if she had been mistaken about the businessman's character. 1 week after Martha and Maya's disappearance, Julian received a summons for an extraordinary board of directors meeting at the company. Richard had secured enough support to formally challenge his leadership. "Julian, this meeting was called out of concern for your current condition," said Richard, taking control of the meeting. "My condition is excellent, thank you. Unfortunately, the facts suggest otherwise. You've been absent from work to search for strangers on the streets. You've made impulsive decisions, like trying to expel me from the company without legal justification." The other board members watched in silence as Richard presented his version of the facts. Julian realized he was being set up, but he also knew his obsession with finding Martha and Maya had damaged his professional credibility. "Richard, you know very well that the people I'm looking for are important to me," Julian defended himself. "Important how?" "They are people you met 2 weeks ago, Julian. This attachment makes no sense." "It makes sense to me. And that's exactly what worries us. Your judgment is compromised." Julian looked around the table and realized he was losing the support of the other board members. Richard had done a convincing job of painting him as emotionally unstable. "What kind of removal are you proposing?" he asked, resigned. "Temporary leave from the executive presidency, with Richard assuming the role on an interim basis until you fully recover. And if I don't accept, then you'll be forced to accept. We have enough votes to approve the decision." Julian realized he was cornered. Richard had skillfully manipulated the situation to gain control of the company, but more than the loss of corporate power, what hurt him most was the fact that his search for Martha and Maya had been used against him. "All right," he said finally. "I accept the temporary leave." Richard smiled victoriously, but tried to maintain an appearance of professional concern. "It's the right decision, Julian. You need time to get yourself together emotionally." That night, Julian returned to his empty, luxurious apartment feeling more alone than he had ever felt. He had lost control of his company, and more importantly, he had lost the 2 people who had brought joy back into his life. He spent hours looking out the window at the illuminated city, wondering where Martha and Maya might be, and if he would ever find them again. For a moment, he considered giving up the search and accepting that they belonged to a world different from his. But then he remembered Maya's words. You can't be sad forever. The girl had taught him about courage and determination, and he couldn't disappoint her by giving up now. The next day, Julian made a radical decision. If he couldn't search for them as a busy businessman, he would search as an ordinary person. He sold his luxury car and bought a simpler used one. He traded his elegant clothes for jeans and basic t-shirts, and he dedicated himself fully to the search. For 2 weeks, Julian visited dozens of communities on the outskirts of New York City. He spoke with hundreds of people, showed photos he had discreetly taken of Martha and Maya, and followed any lead he could get. It was at a street market in Staten Island that he finally received a promising piece of information. A vegetable vendor said she knew a lady named Martha who had recently appeared in the area with a blonde girl. "They're staying with Mrs. Dorothy over on Cross Street Alley," the vendor informed him. Julian felt his heart race, finally a concrete clue to their whereabouts. He followed the vendor's directions and arrived at a narrow street with several small, simple houses. When he knocked on the door of the indicated house, he was greeted by a middle-aged woman who looked suspiciously at the stranger. "Are you Mrs. Dorothy?" asked Julian. "I am. What do you want?" "I'm looking for Martha Mitchell and her granddaughter Maya. I heard they're staying here." Dorothy grew even more suspicious. Martha had told her about the trouble they'd had with important people, and she didn't want to get involved in any mess. "I don't know any Martha," she lied. "Please, Mrs. Dorothy, I'm a friend of theirs. I'm worried because they disappeared without a word. If you were really friends, they wouldn't have disappeared, right?" Julian realized Dorothy was protecting Martha and Maya, which meant they had probably told her what happened at the office. "Mrs. Dorothy, can I explain what happened? There was a huge misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding nothing. A rich man like you doesn't have friendships with poor people like us. That's something I've learned in life." "But I'm not like that. Martha and Maya are the most important people in my life right now." "Then why are they here crying every day?" Dorothy's question hit Julian like a punch to the gut. Knowing that Maya was crying because of him made him feel a physical pain in his chest. "That's exactly why I need to talk to them, to explain what really happened." Dorothy studied him for a few moments, trying to decide if she could trust him. "Mrs. Mitchell went out to look for work. The girl is at school." "At which school?" "At Professor John Smith Elementary School, 2 blocks from here." Julian thanked her and ran toward the school. When he arrived, the doorman initially didn't want to let him in, but after he explained the situation, the man took pity and agreed to call Maya. When the girl appeared at the school gate and saw Julian, her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she stood still, not knowing whether to run to him or move away. "Maya," said Julian, his voice choked, "I looked for you for weeks." "Why didn't you like us anymore?" she asked, still crying. "I do like you. Very much. It was all a terrible misunderstanding. But that man said we couldn't visit you anymore." Julian approached the girl and knelt in his wheelchair to be at her eye level. "Maya, that man had no right to speak for me. I didn't know you had come to the office. If I had known, I would have rushed down to see you." "Really?" "Really. You and your grandmother are the most important people in my life now." Maya finally smiled and moved closer to Julian to hug him. The businessman felt tears roll down his face as he held the girl in his arms again. "I missed you both so much," he said. "We missed you too. Grandma cried a lot, but she didn't want me to see. Where is she now?" "Looking for work. Mrs. Dorothy said we can't stay at her house forever." Julian realized the two were going through even greater hardships because of the misunderstanding. He decided it was time to do something more concrete to help them. "Maya, I'll talk to your grandmother when she gets back. I have an important proposal to make." "What kind of proposal?" "One that will make it so you never have to worry about a place to live or food on the table again." Maya's eyes shone with hope, but she also showed a wisdom beyond her years. "Are you sure you won't regret it again?" The girl's question touched Julian deeply. He realized he had hurt her trust and would need to work to regain it. "Maya, I promise I will never let anyone come between our friendship again. Never again." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. That afternoon, when Martha returned from her fruitless job search, she was shocked to find Julian talking with Dorothy in the living room of the house. Her first reaction was one of distrust and hurt. "Mr. Julian, what are you doing here?" she asked coldly. "Mrs. Mitchell, I came to explain what really happened at my office." "There's no need to explain anything. I already understand everything." "No, you don't. Please give me a chance to clarify." Martha looked at Maya, who was standing beside Julian with eyes shining with happiness. For her granddaughter's sake, she decided to listen. "All right, but be quick." Julian told her in detail about Richard's interference, about how he had expelled his partner from the company, about the weeks he spent searching for them, and about how he had temporarily lost control of the company for refusing to give up their friendship. "You lost your company because of us?" asked Martha, worried. "Not permanently. And even if I had, it would have been worth it. You two are more important to me than any business." "But Mr. Julian..." "Mrs. Mitchell, may I make a proposal? I have a big, empty house. How would you like to come live there with me? Not as employees or dependents, but as family." Martha fell silent, processing the offer. Dorothy and Maya waited anxiously for her response. "Mr. Sterling, that wouldn't be appropriate. People will talk." "Let them talk. I don't care about other people's opinions anymore. And when you get tired of us..." "I will never get tired. You brought joy back into my life." Maya approached her grandmother and took her hand. "Grandma, I really like Mr. Sterling, and he likes us too." Martha looked into her granddaughter's hopeful eyes and into Julian's sincere face. Throughout her entire life, she had learned to distrust easy promises, but there was something in his attitude that seemed genuine. "Can I think about it for a while?" she asked. "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell, but no, this isn't charity. It's pure selfishness on my part. I need you in my life." That night, Martha talked at length with Dorothy about Julian's proposal. Her friend, who had observed the sadness of the two in recent weeks, advised her to accept. "Martha, this man looked for you for weeks. That's not something someone who doesn't care would do." "But what if it's just guilt? What if he regrets it later? And what if it's not? What if it's Maya's chance for a better life?" Martha stayed up all night thinking about the decision. On one hand, her protective instinct made her want to keep her distance from people of a different social class. On the other hand, she saw how Maya had blossomed during the weeks of friendship with Julian. The next morning, Julian returned to Dorothy's house to await Martha's answer. He had spent the night planning how he could make the two feel truly at home if they accepted his proposal. "Mrs. Mitchell, have you made your decision?" he asked, anxious. "I have. We will accept your proposal, but with a few conditions." "What conditions?" "First, I want to work. I won't sit idle in your house." "Agreed. In fact, I was thinking of offering you the supervision of the house cleaning and organization. It's important work." "Second condition, I want to contribute to the household expenses." "Mrs. Mitchell, I won't accept being fully supported. I can pay a little, but I want to pay something." Julian understood that accepting Martha's conditions was essential to preserving her dignity. "All right, we can talk about a symbolic amount." "Third condition, if at any point you get tired of us, you have to tell us honestly. We don't want to be a burden." "That will never happen, but I promise to always be honest." Maya, who had followed the entire negotiation, finally burst with happiness. "Yay, we're going to live with Mr. Sterling." Julian's house was in a gated community in the West Village. It was a modern two-story building with a garden and a pool. When Martha and Maya arrived, they were impressed by the size and elegance of the place. "Wow, it's so big," murmured Maya, looking around with wide eyes. "Now it's our home too," said Julian, smiling. He had prepared 2 rooms especially for them. Martha's was spacious and comfortable, with a large bed and a small office where she could handle the household administration. Maya's room had been decorated with vibrant colors and was full of books, toys, and art supplies. "All of this is mine?" asked the girl, incredulous. "All of this is yours?" Maya hugged Julian tightly, and he felt he had made the right decision. During the first weeks, there was a period of adjustment. Martha gradually took over the supervision of the house, organizing everything with efficiency and care. She hired some people from their own community to help with cleaning, creating job opportunities for those in need. Maya was enrolled in a nearby private school, but it took some time for her to adapt to the new environment. The other children came from wealthy families, and she felt out of place at first. It was Julian who helped her gain confidence, explaining that what mattered wasn't where she came from, but who she was. "Remember what you did for me on the first day we met," he said. "You were brave and kind. Those qualities are more important than any fancy clothes or expensive toy." Gradually, Maya found her place at the new school. Her warm and generous personality won over classmates and teachers. She always offered to help those who were struggling, and soon became one of the most beloved children in the class. At home, a loving routine was established. Mornings began with coffee made by Martha, while Julian helped Maya with her homework. In the afternoons after work, they would gather to talk about each other's day. But the tranquility was shattered when Richard managed to orchestrate a final move to remove Julian permanently from the company. He had spread rumors that Julian was mentally unstable and had convinced other shareholders that a change in leadership was necessary. "Julian, I regret to inform you that the board has decided on your permanent removal as chairman," said Richard during a tense meeting. "On what grounds?" "Erratic behavior, questionable decisions, and primarily your association with dubious elements." Julian understood that Richard was referring to Martha and Maya as dubious elements. "Richard, I built this company. You can't just steal it from me." "I'm not stealing. I'm saving it. The company needs stable leadership." "And you think you're that leadership?" "I have the investors' confidence. You've lost it." Julian left the meeting knowing he had definitively lost control of the company he had created. But strangely, he didn't feel as devastated as he expected. In recent months, he had discovered there were things more important than corporate success. When he got home and told Martha and Maya what had happened, they were devastated. "Mr. Julian, this is our fault," said Martha with tears in her eyes. "It's no one's fault, Mrs. Mitchell. It was an important lesson about what really matters in life. But you lost everything because of us." "I didn't lose everything. I gained a family." Maya approached him and took his hand. "Aren't you sad?" "A little. But I'm happier than I am sad." "Why?" "Because I learned that having a lot of money isn't as important as having people who truly love you." During the following weeks, Julian faced financial difficulties for the first time in years. His resources were tied up in the company he had lost, and he had to adapt to a simpler standard of living. Martha insisted on contributing more to the household expenses, using her savings from her time working as a cleaner. Maya, even though she was a child, also wanted to help, offering to sell her drawings in the park. "So you don't have to, my flower," said Julian, touched by the girl's generosity. "But I want to help. Grandma always says family helps family." It was this show of solidarity that gave Julian a revolutionary idea. If he could no longer work in the traditional corporate world, perhaps he could create something new, something that combined profit with social purpose. "Mrs. Mitchell, Maya, how about we start our own company?" he proposed during dinner. "What kind of company?" asked Martha. "A recycling and sustainability company. We could hire people from the community where you lived, provide training, create opportunities for decent work." Maya was excited by the idea. "And we could teach the other kids to recycle too." "Exactly. We could have an educational program together." Martha, always practical, asked the most important question. "And where would the money come from to start?" Julian had thought about this. "I'll sell this house and use the money as the initial investment. We'll live in a smaller house closer to the community." "Mr. Julian, are you sure? This house is very beautiful." "I'm sure. A beautiful empty house is worth nothing. A simple house full of love is worth everything." During the following months, Julian, Martha and Maya worked together to create Renew Hope, a recycling cooperative that offered dignified work for people in socially vulnerable situations. The project started small, with just 10 families from Martha's old community. Julian used his business knowledge to organize the logistics, while Martha coordinated the human work with her life experience. Maya became the project's little ambassador, visiting schools to talk about recycling. The first major victory came when they secured a contract with a supermarket chain to collect and process their recyclable materials. The payment allowed them to expand the operation and hire more families. "Grandma, look how many people are working now," said Maya, watching the activity at the sorting center they had set up. "It's beautiful to see, my granddaughter. Dignified work gives a person dignity." Julian observed the transformation not only in the lives of the families working on the project, but in his own life. He had never felt as professionally fulfilled as he did now, seeing the direct result of his work in the lives of real people. 1 year after creating the cooperative, they received a visit from a journalist interested in telling the project's story. During the interview, Julian reflected on his journey. "Don't you regret losing your multi-million-dollar company?" asked the journalist. "Never. I discovered that being truly rich isn't about having a lot of money in the bank. It's about having a purpose that makes sense, and people who love you for who you are, not for what you have." "And what was the turning point in your life?" "The day an 8-year-old girl had the courage to defend me when I was being humiliated. She taught me that strength isn't about size or money, but about character." During the interview, Maya, now 10 years old, was also asked about her experience. "What have you learned from this whole story?" asked the journalist. "I learned that when we help someone, we're actually helping ourselves too. And that family isn't just those who share the same blood, but those who care for us." Martha, proud of her granddaughter, added her own reflection. "I learned that sometimes bad things happen to lead us to better things. If we hadn't gone through hardships, we would never have met Julian." The report on Renew Hope had a great impact, and soon they began receiving partnership and investment proposals. Companies interested in social responsibility wanted to associate with the project. Ironically, Richard Thorne got in touch a few months later, interested in forming a partnership between the company he had stolen from Julian and the recycling cooperative. "Julian, I believe we can put our personal differences aside and make a good deal," he said during a meeting. "Richard, I don't have personal differences with you. I have differences in values." "What do you mean by that?" "I mean you only care about profit. I care about people. But we can combine the two. Profit and social responsibility." Julian looked at Martha, who was present at the meeting as a partner of the cooperative, and then back at Richard. "I'll be direct with you. I don't want to do business with someone who treats people as dubious elements just because they are poor." Richard felt uncomfortable realizing his prejudiced words from the past were being held accountable. "Julian, that was who you really are, Richard, and I no longer wish to be partners with people like that." The refusal of the partnership became a turning point for Julian. He had learned that true success didn't mean accepting any opportunity for profit, but rather staying true to one's own values. 2 years after the cooperative began, Renew Hope had grown tremendously. They processed materials from across the entire New York City metropolitan area and provided jobs for over 200 families. Maya, now 11 years old, had become a young environmental activist. She regularly visited schools to talk about recycling and sustainability, always with the wisdom she had developed through her life experiences. During one of these talks, a teacher asked her what she would say to other children going through hardships. "I would say it doesn't matter where we come from, but where we want to go," Maya replied, "and that sometimes the most important people in our lives appear when we least expect them." "How so?" "Mr. Julian appeared in my life when some boys were being mean to him. If I had just walked by without helping, I would never have met one of the best people in the world." Her words always deeply touched those who heard them, because they came from a real experience of transformation. At home, the routine had become even more affectionate over time. Julian had truly become a grandfather to Maya and a son to Martha. They were a family in the most genuine sense of the word. One evening, while having dinner, Maya asked a question she had long wanted to ask. "Mr. Julian, can I call you Grandpa?" Julian was moved by the request. It was the official recognition that they were a real family. "Of course you can, my granddaughter. It would be an honor." "And can I call Grandma Mitchell great-grandma?" Martha laughed, but was also moved. "Yes, you can, my dear. Now we have a complete family." That night, Julian reflected on how his life had changed since that day on Grand Concourse. He had lost a company, but gained a family. He had lost millions in money, but gained riches that could not be bought. 3 years after the start of Renew Hope, the cooperative had become a national reference in sustainability and social inclusion. Maya, now a 12-year-old teenager, had decided she wanted to study environmental engineering to expand the project's impact even further. During the award ceremony for the cooperative as Social Enterprise of the Year, Julian was invited to give a speech about his journey. "A few years ago, I thought I knew what success was," he began. "I thought it was having a lot of money, a big company, social recognition. Today I know I was completely wrong." He looked at Martha and Maya, who were in the front row, and continued. "True success is waking up every day knowing you are making a difference in other people's lives. It's having a family that loves you, not for what you have, but for who you are. It's discovering that your greatest wealth can be a sincere hug from a child who trusts you." The audience applauded emotionally, but the most important words for Julian came after the ceremony when Maya approached him. "Grandpa, I'm so proud of you." "Why, my granddaughter?" "Because you turned your sadness into joy for other people. Actually, you were the one who taught me that." "How?" "When you had the courage to stand up for me that day. Even though you were so small and I was a stranger, you taught me that we can always choose to do what's right, regardless of the consequences." 5 years after that fateful meeting on Grand Concourse, the lives of everyone involved had been completely transformed. Renew Hope had expanded to other cities, creating thousands of jobs and becoming a model for similar projects across the country. Martha, now 73, had become a recognized community leader, often invited to speak about social entrepreneurship. She maintained her energy and wisdom, always remembering that it's not the size of the help that matters, but the size of the heart of the one who helps. Maya, at 13, had distinguished herself as one of the best students in her school and was already showing natural leadership in environmental projects. She dreamed of studying at one of the best universities in the country and returning to expand the cooperative's work even further. Julian had found a happiness he had never experienced before. His relationship with his wheelchair had also changed. It was no longer a symbol of limitation, but rather a part of his identity that had led him to meet the 2 most important people in his life. On a special evening, during the cooperative's 5th anniversary, they organized a big party in the community where it all began. Hundreds of people attended, many of them with their lives transformed by the project. Mr. Joe, now 75, and working as a coordinator for one of the cooperative's units, insisted on making a toast. I want to toast to 3 people who proved that family isn't about blood, but about love, and who proved that helping others is the best way to help yourself. During the party, a child from the community approached Maya and asked how she had managed to turn a rich man into family. "I didn't turn him into anything," Maya replied, with the wisdom of someone who had lived far more than her age suggested. "I just showed that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness. The rest he did on his own." "But how did you know he was a good person?" "I saw it in his eyes. He was very sad, but he wasn't angry at the world. And people who don't get angry when they suffer are usually good people." That night, as the party continued, Julian, Martha, and Maya sat in a quiet corner to talk. "Can you believe it's been 5 years since we met?" said Julian. "It feels like a lifetime," replied Martha. "For me, my life only truly began that day," added Maya. "Why do you say that?" asked Julian. "Because it was the day I learned that we can change other people's lives just by being kind, and that sometimes when we save someone, we're actually saving ourselves too." Julian looked at that girl who had grown so much in wisdom as well as height, and remembered the brave child who had put herself between him and his attackers 5 years before. "Maya, you know you saved my life that day, right? How so, Grandpa?" "I was very lost and very alone. If you hadn't shown up, I probably would have given up believing there are good people in the world. But there are, we just have to look in the right places." "And where are the right places?" "Everywhere there are people with open hearts." Martha watched the conversation between her grandson and her granddaughter with a feeling of completeness she had never experienced. Her life had been full of difficulties, but it had all been worth it to reach that moment of genuine happiness. "Do you know what I wish for the 3 of us?" she said. "What, great-grandma?" "That we always stay together, helping other people discover that family is who we choose to love." "That will definitely happen," said Julian, "because I learned that when you build something with love, that thing becomes indestructible." Years later, Maya would become a renowned environmental engineer and expand Renew Hope to dozens of cities. Martha would remain the heart of the project well into her old age, always remembering that the best legacy we can leave is the example of how to treat people. Julian would find in the cooperative not just a new professional purpose, but the family he had always wished for. He would discover that being a father and grandfather didn't depend on biological ties, but on bonds of love and dedication. The story of the poorest girl in the neighborhood who rescued a humiliated, wheelchair-bound millionaire would become legend in the community, passed down from generation to generation as proof that kindness can transform lives in unimaginable ways. But for the 3 protagonists of this story, the most important thing wasn't the legends or the recognition. It was knowing they had found in each other a true family, built on the solid foundation of unconditional love and mutual dedication. And whenever someone asked Julian what the most important moment of his life had been, he would answer without hesitation, "The moment an 8-year-old girl taught me that courage has no age, that kindness has no social class, and that family is who we choose to love." Maya, in turn, always said the best lesson she had learned was that when we see someone in need of help, we shouldn't think twice before acting, because that person might become the most important one in our life. And Martha, with the wisdom of someone who had lived a long life and learned through hardship, always advised, "Never judge a person by the clothes they wear or the house they live in. Judge them by the size of their heart and their willingness to help others." The Renew Hope Cooperative would continue to grow and become an international model for combining environmental sustainability with social inclusion. But its greatest success wouldn't be measured in tons of recycled material or jobs created. Its greatest success would be having proven that 3 people from completely different worlds can come together to form a family stronger than any adversity, more lasting than any material wealth, and more transformative than any business venture. And so, the story of the poorest girl in the neighborhood who rescued a humiliated, wheelchair-bound millionaire actually became the story of 3 people who saved each other, discovering that true love knows no social barriers, has no defined age, and needs no paperwork to be made official. Because in the end, That's what family is. People we choose to love and who choose to love us back, regardless of anything else. End of story. Now tell us, what did you think of this story of transformation and love? Do you believe small acts of kindness can really change lives? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.